The sound of the front door slamming open echoed throughout the massive mansion. Thomas Beckett, the billionaire entrepreneur, stormed through the hallway, his footsteps heavy on the polished marble floors. The house was eerily silent, a stark contrast to the usual hum of daily life. He had not informed anyone of his unexpected return, not even his wife or the housekeeper. His eyes were cold, narrowed with frustration, as he moved swiftly toward the kitchen, where he knew his daughter usually spent her afternoons. As he rounded the corner, he froze. There, in the bright light of the kitchen, was his young daughter, Lily, sitting at the table. But what truly caught his attention was the woman beside her. A black woman, dressed in the faded uniform of a maid, was sitting across from Lily, their heads bent low in conversation, a soft laugh escaping from Lily's lips. For a brief moment, Thomas stood frozen, his gaze locked onto the scene in front of him. The maid was laughing with his daughter, a scene that should have been innocent but felt wrong. He hadn't expected to see this, certainly not like this. The maid, who was supposed to be cleaning, had no business sitting at the table with his precious Lily. His thoughts raced. How dare she? His mouth tightened, and he took a deep breath to steady himself. The sound of the front door had not even fully faded, and already, this woman was overstepping her bounds. He had trusted her to clean the house, not to socialize with his daughter. What is this? Thomas's voice cut through the air, sharp and filled with authority. Both Lily and the maid looked up in surprise. Lily's eyes widened in shock, her small hands instinctively moving to push away the half-eaten plate of food. The maid sat up straight, but her expression remained calm, unfazed. "Mr. Beckett," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Lily and I were just talking. She's had a rough week at school, and I thought it might help if we shared a moment." Thomas's eyes narrowed further, a mixture of disbelief and irritation flashing across his face. "You think it's appropriate for you to sit here with her? Do you think you have the right to take time with my daughter?" He felt the sting of anger rising in his chest. He had worked so hard to build his wealth, his status, and this woman, this maid, dared to cross a line he never thought possible. "I'm just trying to make her feel better, sir," the maid said, her voice calm and almost too composed for the tense situation. She didn't seem to be intimidated. "I understand, but this is not your place," Thomas snapped. He took another step forward, his eyes flickering from the maid to Lily, who was now quietly watching her father. His mind was racing. How had this happened? How had he let his guard down so much that a woman in his house, someone who worked for him, could slip into this kind of familiarity with his daughter? The anger bubbled up inside him, but he quickly masked it with a stern, controlled voice. "Lily, go to your room. Now." Lily stood slowly, looking from her father to the maid, confusion written on her innocent face. But she obeyed, moving quietly toward the hallway. As Thomas watched her leave, he turned his gaze back to the maid. He was now more resolute than ever. This needed to be dealt with. "I don't want you speaking to my daughter again. Do you understand?" The maid met his gaze steadily, her eyes unwavering. "Yes, sir," she said softly. There was a long pause, the tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud, but no one spoke. Thomas felt his pulse quicken, his mind still struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The maid had broken the unspoken rules of their house, and he wasn't sure how to fix it just yet. But one thing was certain, things would never be the same again. The room was silent, but Thomas Beckett's mind was racing. The anger that had first filled him quickly turned to confusion. As he stood there, his gaze fixed on the spot where the maid had been moments before, something inside him gnawed at him. He had seen her so often in his house, cleaning, working quietly, and yet today, something was different. Why did it bother him so much to see her sitting with Lily, his daughter? It wasn't just the familiarity, it was the unexpected defiance. The maid was supposed to be a part of the background, a figure that blended in, doing her job and staying out of the way. She had crossed a line, he felt, but he couldn't quite explain why it was so unsettling. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. His personal assistant, Carol, stepped in cautiously, her eyes flicking to the empty chair and then to Thomas. "Sir, everything okay?" she asked, though it was clear from her tone she already knew something was wrong. Thomas didn't respond right away. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, trying to gather his thoughts. "Where's Lily?" he asked, his voice strained. Carol hesitated for a moment before answering. "She went to her room after you told her to." Thomas nodded, though his mind was still elsewhere. "And the maid, Maya?" he asked, the name slipping out before he could stop it. "She left, sir," Carol replied. "She went straight to the employees' quarters." "Should I speak to her?" Thomas stood still, staring out of the large windows overlooking the expansive estate. "No, I'll handle it," he said quietly. Carol gave him a look of uncertainty, but she said nothing. She could tell this situation was different from the usual. Thomas Beckett had always been a man of control, someone who commanded respect and ran his business with an iron fist. But in this moment, he felt something slipping, something he couldn't quite grasp. Later that night, after dinner, Thomas couldn't shake the image of the maid and his daughter from his mind. He had seen his daughter laugh, something she hadn't done in days. He could almost see the way her face lit up in that moment, the way Maya had interacted with her, calm, patient, caring. It bothered him more than it should have. Lily had always been a delicate child, prone to mood swings and bouts of sadness, especially after her mother's passing. Thomas had tried his best to provide for her, to give her everything she needed, but he had never been able to give her the one thing she truly needed, someone who understood her. Someone who didn't just see her as a child to be spoiled. Maya had come into their lives as a mere maid, nothing more than an employee. But now, Thomas was questioning everything. What was it about Maya that had caused his daughter to open up? Why did Maya have that effect on her? He had seen how Lily had clammed up around everyone else, her friends, her teachers, even her therapist, but with Maya, it was different. Maya was kind, gentle, and most importantly, she listened to Lily. Thomas thought about how his daughter had confided in Maya about her struggles at school, about the kids who made fun of her, about the loneliness that crept in when the house was too quiet. Maya had not just been a bystander to Lily's pain. She had been a presence in her life, offering support when no one else had. That realization hit Thomas like a ton of bricks. The maid, the woman he had dismissed for so long, had somehow become the one person who truly understood his daughter. But that wasn't supposed to happen. Maya was supposed to be a figure who blended into the background, just another face in the house. She was not supposed to have an emotional impact on his daughter. That wasn't part of the deal. But as Thomas sat there, replaying everything in his mind, he knew that he had a decision to make. Should he confront Maya? Should he fire her, as he had threatened earlier, to restore order in his life? Or was there something deeper going on here? Something he had overlooked? He couldn't shake the feeling that Maya's presence in the house wasn't just a coincidence. And for the first time in a long time, Thomas Beckett was questioning his own judgments. In the following days, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. He had always prided himself on being in control of every aspect of his life, but now, with Maya's presence lingering in his mind, he felt like he was losing his grip. It was late one evening when he decided he needed to confront her. He could no longer ignore the strange pull he felt whenever he thought about her. He had to understand what was happening, even if he didn't fully understand it himself. As he walked down the long hallway toward the employee quarters, his footsteps echoed in the silence of the house. The grand chandeliers above cast long shadows on the marble floor, but none of that grandeur seemed to matter now. His focus was solely on Maya. He arrived at her door and hesitated for a moment before knocking sharply. The door opened slowly, and there she stood, her expression calm, as if she had known this moment would come. "Mr. Beckett," she said, her voice soft, but steady. "Can I help you?" Thomas looked at her, his eyes searching for answers. "I need to talk to you," he said. "It's about Lily." Maya didn't flinch or show any sign of fear. She stepped aside, allowing him into her small quarters. The room was modest, the walls lined with shelves full of books and personal items. It was a far cry from the lavishness of the rest of the house, yet it felt genuine. Thomas felt out of place, like he didn't belong in this part of the house. But he pushed the feeling aside. "What is it that you've been doing with my daughter?" Thomas asked, his voice low. You've been spending a lot of time with her, and I want to know why. Maya paused for a moment, as if considering her words carefully. Lily is a very special girl, she said finally. She's been struggling with some things, and I've just been there to listen. Sometimes, that's all she needs. Thomas felt a pang of discomfort. She doesn't need you, Maya, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She needs a proper therapist, not someone like you. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't back down. You don't understand, she replied, her voice firm. Lily doesn't need another stranger telling her what to do. She needs someone who sees her, who listens to her. That's what I've been doing. Thomas was taken aback by her words. He hadn't expected her to push back like this. He had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions. But now, standing in front of Maya, he felt like he was being challenged in a way he wasn't used to. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. And what exactly do you think you're doing for her that I can't do? Maya took a step closer to him, her gaze unwavering. I think you care about your daughter, Mr. Beckett. But you're too busy with your work, your empire, to really see what she's going through. I'm not here to replace you, I'm just here to help her feel seen, to help her feel like she's not alone. There was a long silence as Thomas absorbed her words. He had always been distant with Lily, focused on his business and his own success. He had never been the father he should have been. And now, here was Maya, someone he had once dismissed, showing him the kind of care and attention that his own daughter needed. He could feel the weight of her words sinking in, a realization that he had failed as a father. Maya's gaze softened as she saw the change in Thomas. I know this is hard for you, she said quietly. But Lily is a good girl. She just needs someone who believes in her, who will stand by her, even when things get tough. Thomas stood there, speechless. He had spent so much of his life building his wealth, his reputation, but at what cost? He had neglected the most important thing in his life, his daughter. Maya's words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas didn't know what to say. He had always thought he was doing everything for Lily, but now he saw how little he had really done. He had let his work take precedence over his family, and now his daughter had found comfort in someone else. Someone he had underestimated. The weight of his failure pressed heavily on his chest. Maya had done what he couldn't, she had made Lily feel seen, heard, and cared for. He had been so focused on his own success that he had failed to see his daughter's pain. He looked at Maya, his eyes no longer filled with anger or frustration, but with something else, guilt, remorse, and a deep sense of regret. I've been a terrible father, he said quietly, almost to himself. Maya didn't respond right away, but her expression softened. You're not a terrible father, she said gently. You're just lost. You've been so focused on everything else that you forgot what matters most. Thomas nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He had spent so much time building his empire, but in the process, he had lost what truly mattered. And now, standing here, facing the woman he had once dismissed, he realized that it was never too late to change. The next morning, the house felt different. The usual hum of servants and housekeepers moving about, preparing for the day, was absent. Thomas could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him as he walked through the grand halls of his mansion. It was as if the walls themselves were echoing with his internal conflict. He had always prided himself on being in control, on having everything in order, but now he wasn't sure where his life was headed. After his conversation with Maya the previous night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been living a lie. He had built his empire, amassed wealth, and provided his daughter with every material possession she could ever want, yet he had failed to give her the one thing she truly needed, his presence. He had been so focused on his career, his image, that he had ignored the subtle signs of loneliness in his daughter's eyes. And now, it was Maya, of all people, who had shown her the attention and care she needed. Maya had become the emotional support Lily had been missing, and Thomas was beginning to realize that it was a role he should have played all along. As Thomas sat at the breakfast table, his mind continued to race. He was supposed to be at peace, enjoying the luxury of his home, but instead, his thoughts were consumed by guilt and regret. Maya had opened his eyes to the reality he had been avoiding for so long. The silence in the dining room was heavy, broken only by the soft clinking of silverware. His wife, Sarah, sat across from him, her eyes fixed on her phone, seemingly oblivious to the tension in the room. She had been distant for a while now, their marriage strained by years of neglect. Thomas had spent so much time building his business empire that he had neglected his wife, his daughter, and even himself. He had let his personal life wither away while he focused on making more money. He could feel Sarah's coldness from across the table. She hadn't said a word to him in days. The emptiness between them had grown so vast that it felt like there was no way back. And then there was Lily. His daughter was a sweet, intelligent young girl who had been burdened by his neglect. She had started to pull away from him years ago, ever since her mother had passed away. He had tried to comfort her, but his efforts were often half-hearted. He hadn't realized that what Lily needed wasn't just a father who provided for her, but one who was emotionally available. Maya had done what he couldn't. She had offered Lily something. He hadn't been able to give her empathy, understanding, and genuine care. It stung to admit that someone who was supposed to be beneath him in status had become the person his daughter truly needed. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Thomas felt a deep sense of shame as he remembered the way he had dismissed Maya when she first arrived in his home. She had been nothing more than a servant, someone who was meant to be invisible in the background. But now, he saw her for what she truly was, someone who had shown his daughter kindness when he had failed to do so. Maya had not just been a maid in his house, she had been a guiding light for Lily when she needed it most. And now, Thomas was realizing that he had taken that for granted. The door to the dining room opened, and Lily walked in, her eyes downcast. She looked up briefly at her father, but quickly averted her gaze. Thomas could see the hesitance in her movements, the way she walked on eggshells around him. He had done this to her. He had created this distance between them by being too wrapped up in his own world. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said softly, trying to bridge the gap. Lily nodded quietly, her gaze still averted. She sat down at the table, picking at her food, not meeting his eyes. It hurt him to see her like this, to see how closed off she had become. He reached across the table, gently placing his hand on hers. "Lily, I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I know I've let you down. I've been so focused on everything else that I didn't see what you really needed. But I promise you, from now on, I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to be the father you deserve." Lily looked at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face. She didn't say anything at first, but after a long pause, she spoke quietly. "I don't need things, Dad. I need you." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. It was so simple, yet he had missed it all along. All she had ever wanted was his attention, his love, his presence. And he had failed to provide that. A tear slipped down Thomas's cheek, but he didn't wipe it away. He had never felt more vulnerable in his life. He had always been the strong, successful businessman, but now he was just a father, realizing the mistakes he had made. Maya had given his daughter the one thing he couldn't: emotional support and understanding. And in doing so, she had shown him the true meaning of fatherhood. It was not about money, success, or power. It was about being there for your family when they needed you the most. The next few days felt like a turning point in Thomas Beckett's life. He had made a promise to Lily that he would be there for her, that he would be the father she deserved. And now, every moment felt heavier with the weight of his own shortcomings. Maya's presence in the house, once something he took for granted, now felt like a constant reminder of how far he had strayed from his responsibilities. Yet, as much as he wanted to feel angry or frustrated with her, he couldn't. She had been the one to step in when he had failed. Maya was the one who had been there for Lily when he had been too absorbed in his work, too caught up in his success. He found himself walking down the grand hallways of his mansion, lost in thought. The familiar luxuries around him no longer felt as satisfying. He had everything he had ever dreamed of: wealth, power, success, but something was missing. His family. And that realization hit him harder than he expected. As he reached the door to the maid's quarters, he paused. His heart pounded in his chest, and a deep sense of guilt lingered in his stomach. He had never been one to apologize, let alone admit that he needed help. But Maya had made him realize just how much he needed to change, and he knew that this was the first step. He knocked softly on the door. The door creaked open, and Maya stood in front of him, her expression calm and guarded, as if she already knew what he had come for. "Mr. Beckett," she said, her voice steady. "Is everything all right?" Thomas stood there for a moment, not knowing exactly how to begin. He had always been a man of few words, but now, in this moment, he felt like his whole world had turned upside down. "I need to talk." "To you," he said quietly, his voice filled with hesitation. Maya stepped aside to let him in, her eyes searching his face. "Come in," she said softly. The room was small but cozy, with shelves of books and personal items. It was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the rest of the house, and Thomas couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. He had never been in here before, and he suddenly realized how little he truly knew about the people who worked for him. Maya had always been just a figure in the background, someone who cleaned the house and took care of things, but now he saw her in a completely different light. "Maya," he began, taking a deep breath, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About my daughter, about you, and about me." Maya didn't say anything, but her eyes remained steady, waiting for him to continue. "I've been a terrible father," Thomas said, his voice cracking slightly. "I've spent so much time building my empire that I neglected the one thing that really mattered. My family." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. "I've been so focused on success and wealth, thinking that I was providing for Lily in the best way possible. But I failed to see that what she needed wasn't things, it was me. She needed my attention, my love, my time." Maya remained silent, allowing him to speak. She had always been composed, but now, Thomas saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a recognition, maybe even a hint of understanding. "You've been there for her when I wasn't," Thomas continued, his words coming faster now. "You've given her something I couldn't. You've listened to her, supported her, and made her feel seen when I couldn't even notice she was struggling." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And I don't know how to thank you for that." Maya finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Beckett. I did it because Lily needed someone to see her. She's a beautiful, intelligent girl, and she deserves more than just a father who provides for her. She deserves a father who loves her, who listens to her, who makes her feel important." Thomas's chest tightened as her words sank in. He had failed, but now, he could see a path forward. A path that didn't just involve buying more things for his daughter, but being present for her in the way she truly needed. "I know," he said quietly, "I know now." There was a long silence as Thomas stood there, feeling the weight of everything he had just admitted. He wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Maybe it wasn't too late to fix things. Maybe it wasn't too late to be the father Lily needed. He looked at Maya, his expression sincere. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm going to try. I'm going to be there for Lily, and I'm going to start being the father I should have been all along." Maya nodded, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I believe you, Mr. Beckett." She didn't say anything more, but Thomas knew that Maya's presence in their lives had already begun to change everything. For the first time, he felt like he was stepping out of the shadow of his own success and into a life that mattered more than anything he had ever built. It wasn't the wealth or the power that made a person truly successful, it was the relationships, the love, and the presence they gave to the ones they cared about. And Thomas knew that he was just beginning to understand that now. Days passed, and Thomas kept his promise. He spent more time with Lily, talking to her, listening to her in ways he never had before. He started to realize just how much he had missed in his own daughter's life. Their conversations were different now. Lily, who had once been so quiet and distant, began to open up to him. It wasn't easy. She still carried the scars of the neglect, and every step they took toward rebuilding their bond felt fragile. But it was progress. The house felt warmer. The tension that had once hung in the air like a heavy cloud started to lift. There was a new dynamic in the house, one that was unfamiliar but also comforting. Thomas found himself thinking about Maya more often, her impact on Lily's life clearer than ever. She had been the one to help break through the walls that had kept Lily locked in her own world. But Thomas still had a lot of questions. What had happened between them that had led to this sudden shift in his daughter? Maya had been in the house for months, doing her job quietly, without drawing attention to herself. But her influence on Lily was undeniable, and that left Thomas wondering if he had overlooked something important. One afternoon, after spending time with Lily, Thomas found himself once again standing outside Maya's quarters. The door was closed, but he knew he needed to talk to her. He had questions that needed answers. As he knocked, his mind raced. Was this the right time? Could he even ask the right questions? The door opened, and there stood Maya, her expression calm, as though she had known he would come. "Mr. Beckett," she greeted him, her tone steady but warm. "What can I do for you?" Thomas took a deep breath, the weight of his thoughts pressing on him. "Maya," he began, his voice softer than he intended, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for Lily. I can see the difference in her. She's happier, more open. I don't know how to thank you for that." Maya nodded slightly, but her gaze was thoughtful, as if she were weighing her words carefully. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Beckett. Lily needed someone to listen. That's all I've done. I just gave her a space to be herself." Thomas felt a pang in his chest. It seemed so simple when she put it that way. Listening. That was something he had failed to do for so long. But there was something deeper he needed to understand. "But how?" he asked, almost to himself. "How did you get through to her when I couldn't?" Maya stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Let's sit down," she said quietly. He followed her inside, the room small but cozy, with shelves of books and a small desk. It felt worlds away from the cold, opulent spaces he was used to in the main house. He sat, and Maya did as well, her eyes meeting his. "Lily is a sensitive soul," Maya said, her voice steady. "She has been through a lot, losing her mother, then having a father who was distant. She needed time to heal, and sometimes, the best way to heal is not with words, but with silence. I just gave her a chance to feel heard, to feel seen." Thomas absorbed her words, the realization hitting him hard. He had always thought he was doing the right thing by providing for Lily, by giving her everything money could buy. But in doing so, he had neglected the most important thing, her emotional well-being. He had given her material possessions, but not his time, not his heart. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, feeling the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "I've been so focused on my work, on building my success, that I didn't see what was right in front of me." Maya gave a small, understanding smile. "It's not uncommon," she said softly. "But the important thing is that you're here now. You're trying. And that's all that matters. It's never too late to change." Her words gave him a sense of hope, a glimmer that maybe, just maybe, he could fix things. But there was more he needed to know. "What about you, Maya?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "What about you? Why did you stay? Why did you care so much about my daughter when you didn't have to?" Maya was silent for a moment, her gaze shifting slightly as if she were considering how much to share. "I stayed because Lily reminded me of someone I used to know," she said finally. "Someone who needed someone to believe in them. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like no one is really looking at you. I didn't want Lily to feel like that. I wanted her to know that someone cared, someone was paying attention." Thomas sat back, the weight of her words sinking in. She wasn't just a maid, he realized. Maya had her own story, her own struggles, and she had chosen to use her experience to help his daughter. It humbled him. It made him realize that sometimes, the most unexpected people can change your life in the most profound ways. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything. I don't think I can ever repay you for what you've done for my daughter." Maya gave a soft smile. "You don't need to repay me, Mr. Beckett. Just keep being there for her. That's all she needs from you." As Thomas left her quarters, he felt a shift in himself. It wasn't just his relationship. with Lily that had changed. It was him, too. He had been blind to the things that truly mattered. But now, he was starting to see again. Maya had opened his eyes, not just to the needs of his daughter, but to his own shortcomings. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could truly begin to change. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the house began to shift in a way that Thomas never thought possible. He was no longer the distant, work-obsessed billionaire who spent every waking moment building his empire. He was trying to be a father. He had promised Lily that he would be there for her, and although it hadn't been easy, he was making progress. Each day brought a new challenge, but also a deeper understanding of his daughter and his role in her life. But just as he was starting to feel like he was making the right moves, life threw him another curveball. It happened one afternoon when Thomas was in his office. He had been reviewing some business documents, the usual work that kept him occupied, when he received a call that stopped him dead in his tracks. It was from Sarah, his wife. Her voice, typically composed and calm, sounded frantic, as if something had just shattered the piece they had been trying to rebuild. "Thomas, it's Lily. She's missing," she said, her voice quivering. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he couldn't process what she had just said. "What do you mean, missing?" he asked, his own voice tight with panic. "I don't know. I was looking for her, and she's not in her room. Her phone is gone, and the back door was open," Sarah explained, her words coming out in a rush. Thomas's heart raced as the gravity of the situation sank in. He immediately stood up, grabbing his coat and heading for the door. "I'll be right there." "Don't worry, we'll find her," he said, his voice barely audible, but filled with urgency. As he rushed out of the office, his mind raced with a million possibilities. Where could Lily have gone? Was she upset? Did she run away? These thoughts tore through him like a storm. He knew that he hadn't been the perfect father, but he couldn't lose her now. He couldn't bear the thought of failing her again. When he arrived at home, the house was eerily quiet. Sarah was sitting in the living room, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't say a word when he entered, but the look on her face said everything. Thomas could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had been feeling since he received the call. "I checked the usual places," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "She's not in the house, Thomas. And I can't reach her on her phone." Thomas nodded, trying to remain calm, but deep down, he felt the panic rising. "We need to call the police," he said, his mind racing. "And I need to talk to Maya. She's been with Lily. Maybe she knows where she went." As soon as Maya arrived, Thomas could see the concern etched on her face. She was clearly worried, but there was something else in her eyes too, something that told him she was hiding something. "Maya, I need you to be honest with me," Thomas said, his voice serious. "Lily is missing. Do you know where she could have gone?" Maya hesitated for a moment before speaking. I don't know, Mr. Beckett. I haven't seen her since this morning. But I know she's been struggling. I've tried to help, but sometimes, I think she just feels like no one understands her." Her words hit Thomas hard. He had been so focused on fixing things, on being there for Lily, that he hadn't fully understood the depth of her pain. Maya had been the one to listen to Lily when he couldn't. She had been the one to truly see her, and now, Lily was missing. His mind raced with guilt and fear. "We have to find her," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "We can't let her feel like this. We can't let her slip away." Maya nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I'll help you look, Mr. Beckett," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Together, they combed through the house, searching every room, every corner, calling out Lily's name, but there was no response. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to find her. Hours passed, and there was still no sign of Lily. The fear in Thomas's chest grew stronger with each passing minute. He had failed his daughter, and now he feared that he might never see her again. As the night grew darker, they called the police, and soon a team of officers arrived. They began taking statements and organizing a search. Thomas stood outside, his mind spinning, his heart racing. He had always prided himself on being in control, on being the one to solve problems, but now, all he could do was wait. He thought about everything Maya had said about Lily's struggles, about how she had felt invisible and alone. He realized now that he had been the one who had made her feel that way. He had built his empire, but he had never built the kind of relationship with his daughter that truly mattered. The next morning, they found her. She had been hiding in the woods behind the house, scared and confused, but safe. When Thomas saw her, relief flooded through him, but so did shame. He had let her slip away, but now he had another chance. He knelt down in front of her, his eyes filled with tears. "Lily," he said softly, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I've failed you. But I will never let you feel like this again. I will be here for you, always." Lily looked up at him, her eyes still filled with fear, but now, there was a spark of hope in them. She reached out and took his hand. For the first time in a long time, Thomas felt the warmth of his daughter's trust. It wasn't too late. He could still be the father she needed. He could still make things right. The days following Lily's disappearance were some of the most emotionally taxing of Thomas's life. The relief he felt when they found her in the woods behind the house was immeasurable, but it was quickly followed by a deep sense of shame. For the first time in years, Thomas was fully aware of how much he had neglected his daughter. As he sat beside her in her room, her head resting against his shoulder, he realized that he could never let her feel this way again. The bond between them had been broken, but it was not beyond repair. For the first time in a long time, Thomas was determined to put his daughter first. He had spent so many years building his empire, pushing forward without ever truly considering what his family needed. The emptiness he had felt after his wife, Sarah, had withdrawn from him seemed insignificant now compared to the fear of losing his daughter. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Thomas found himself once again sitting in the living room, deep in thought. He had been talking with Lily for hours, apologizing, promising to do better, but there was something else lingering in his mind, Maya. She had been the one to help Lily when he couldn't. Maya had seen his daughter for who she truly was, not just as a privileged child, but as a young girl who had been struggling with the loss of her mother, with his absence, with feeling alone. Maya had given her something he never had. Empathy. Understanding. Care. And now, Thomas knew that he had to acknowledge that. Maya had become more than just a maid in their house. She had been a mentor, a friend, a confidant to his daughter when he had been too caught up in his work to see the real need. As he sat there, contemplating everything, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Maya. She had come to check on Lily, to make sure everything was all right. "Mr. Beckett," she said softly, standing in the doorway. "How is she?" Thomas stood up, his expression a mix of gratitude and regret. "She's resting," he said, his voice low. "But we need to talk." Maya nodded and stepped inside. She had always been composed, but there was a certain sadness in her eyes now. She knew something had shifted in their relationship. "I know this might be hard for you, but I want you to know that I'm not here to take anything from you," Maya began. "I'm here because I care about Lily. And I care about you, too, Mr. Beckett." Thomas's heart tightened at her words. "I've failed, Maya. I've been so focused on building something that doesn't matter that I've forgotten what really matters. My daughter needs me, and I haven't been there for her." Maya looked at him for a moment, and then, with a sigh, she walked over to him. "I understand," she said softly. "But the important thing is that you're here now. You're trying, and that's what counts." Her words resonated deeply with Thomas. She was right. He had missed so much of Lily's life, but he was here now, and he was ready to change. Maya had helped him see that. "I don't know how to thank you," Thomas said quietly. "For everything you've done for Lily. For what you've done for me." Maya smiled, her eyes softening. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Beckett. I just want to see Lily happy. That's all I've ever wanted." Thomas nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He realized, at that moment, that Maya's presence in their lives had been more than just a fortunate twist of fate. She had been the missing link, the one who bridged the gap between him and his daughter, the one who had given Lily the chance to feel seen and heard. I want to make things right, Thomas said, his voice firm. For Lily. And for you. I'm going to be the father she deserves. And I'm going to be the man I should have been all along. Maya's smile widened, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew it wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and a willingness to change. But he was ready. Thank you, he said again, his voice full of sincerity. For everything. Maya didn't say anything else. She simply nodded, her expression one of quiet understanding. She knew, as well as he did, that the journey ahead would be difficult, but it was a journey worth taking. For the first time in a long time, Thomas felt like he was finally on the right path. He had made mistakes, but he was determined to do better. He had lost sight of what really mattered, but now, he saw clearly. And it was all thanks to Maya, his unexpected guide in a world where he had once thought he had everything figured out. The following weeks were a delicate balance of progress and setbacks. Thomas had promised Lily that he would change, that he would be there for her. He made a conscious effort every single day to keep that promise. He spent more time with her, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally as well. He began to really listen when she spoke. And Lily, in turn, began to respond. The walls she had built around herself started to come down. It wasn't easy. There were moments when Lily would retreat back into her shell, moments when she didn't know how to trust him, but Thomas was patient. Maya had taught him that sometimes, all you could do was be there, not try to fix everything, but just offer support and love. Maya's presence in the house became more prominent, but Thomas had finally come to terms with it. He no longer saw her as just a maid or an employee. Maya was a part of their family in a way that he hadn't fully understood before. She had helped to bridge the gap between him and Lily, and for that, he was deeply grateful. One evening, as he sat in the library, reviewing some paperwork, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Maya standing at the doorway. She had always been calm, composed, but tonight, there was something different about her. She looked troubled, as if she were wrestling with something she couldn't quite put into words. Mr. Beckett, Maya began, her voice softer than usual, I need to talk to you. Thomas set aside the papers and gestured for her to come in. What's on your mind? He asked, sensing the tension in her voice. Maya hesitated before taking a seat across from him. It's about Lily, she said, her eyes flickering with concern. I've noticed that she's been struggling. She's been trying hard to open up to you, but I think she's still holding back. She's afraid that if she lets herself trust you fully, she'll be hurt again. You need to be patient with her, Mr. Beckett. She's been through a lot, and it's going to take time for her to heal completely. Thomas listened intently, his heart sinking at the realization that Lily's struggles weren't over. He had thought that by spending time with her, by showing her he cared, everything would be fixed. But it wasn't that simple. Maya was right. There were scars, deep ones, that he couldn't see, and it would take more than just time to heal them. I've been patient, he said quietly, his voice betraying a hint of frustration. But how long is this going to take, Maya? How much longer do I have to wait? Maya looked at him, her expression softening. It's not about waiting, Mr. Beckett. It's about showing up every day. It's about consistency. Lily needs to know that you're there. For her, no matter what. She needs to know that you're not going anywhere. Thomas sat back in his chair, the weight of her words sinking in. He had been so focused on getting things back to normal, on fixing everything, that he had forgotten the most important part of the process, trust. Trust was fragile, and it couldn't be rushed. He had to earn it, and he had to prove to Lily, day after day, that he was committed to being the father she needed. I understand, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm not going anywhere. I'll keep showing up for her. Maya gave him a small smile, one that conveyed both reassurance and understanding. I know you will, Mr. Beckett. And that's all Lily needs. In that moment, Thomas realized that he had learned something far more important than just how to be a better father. He had learned the true meaning of patience and consistency, two things he had never valued as much as success. But now, he understood.
It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being there.
And as long as he kept showing up, there was hope for healing, for both him and Lily. That night, as he walked to Lily's room to say goodnight, Thomas felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He knocked softly on her door and waited for her to call out. When she did, he entered, finding her sitting at the edge of her bed, her book resting in her lap. She looked up at him with a small, tentative smile, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas felt like he was finally doing something right. He sat beside her, his heart full. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly. "How was your day?" Lily shrugged but didn't look away. "It was okay," she said, her voice quiet but not as distant as it had been in the past. Thomas smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I'm glad," he said. "And you know, I just wanted to tell you again, that I'm really proud of you." Lily met his gaze, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something, trust, maybe. Then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, she said, "Thanks, Dad." Thomas's heart swelled with emotion. It wasn't much, but it was everything. It was the first step in rebuilding what had been broken. And as he kissed her forehead and turned to leave, he felt a sense of hope unlike anything he had ever known. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And that was enough. Weeks passed, and the changes in Thomas's life were becoming more apparent. His relationship with Lily, once distant and strained, was now built on a foundation of patience, understanding, and trust. He had worked hard to prove to her that he was there for her, no longer just a father who provided for her, but a father who was present, emotionally available, and willing to listen. Slowly but surely, Lily began to open up to him more. Their conversations, once awkward and forced, were now filled with laughter and moments of quiet understanding. She no longer shied away from him when he approached. She would look him in the eyes, smile, and speak to him as though he were truly her father for the first time in years. Maya had been a crucial part of this transformation. She had helped bridge the gap between father and daughter, not just by listening to Lily, but by showing Thomas how to be a better listener himself. Maya was not just a maid anymore. She had become a mentor, a guide, and even a friend. But despite all the progress, Thomas still felt there was something missing. He had been so focused on reconnecting with Lily that he hadn't fully addressed his own emotions. His relationship with Sarah, his wife, had been distant for a long time. They had lived in the same house, but their bond had withered over time. The emotional distance between them had grown so wide that it felt insurmountable. They barely spoke anymore, and when they did, it was usually about the logistics of running the household or taking care of Lily. There was no warmth, no intimacy. It was as if they were just two people living under the same roof. One evening, after dinner, Sarah and Thomas found themselves alone in the living room. The house was quiet, the only sound coming from the crackling of the fireplace. Thomas looked over at Sarah, his heart heavy with the realization that their marriage had been slowly dying for years. He hadn't been present for her either. He had neglected her needs, just as he had neglected Lily's. But now, after everything that had happened, he knew he had to try. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft but steady. "We need to talk." Sarah looked up from her phone, her expression unreadable. "About what?" she asked, her voice distant. "About us," Thomas said, his heart racing. "About our marriage. I know we've been drifting apart, and I haven't been the husband I should have been. I've been so focused on work, on everything else, that I've forgotten about you. And I'm sorry for that." Sarah didn't say anything at first, her gaze fixed on the fire. The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity. Thomas held his breath, waiting for her response. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice low. "It's not just you, Thomas. It's both of us. We've both been neglecting each other. I've been waiting for you to come back to me, but you were always so busy. And when you weren't busy with work, you were busy with Lily. I've felt invisible for so long." Her words cut through him like a knife. He had known their relationship was in trouble, but hearing Sarah admit how deeply hurt she had been made everything feel so real, so raw. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd made so many mistakes,
but I want to make things right. I want to be the husband you deserve.
Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening for the first time in a long while.
Do you really mean that, Thomas? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
I do, he replied, his eyes locked onto hers.
I've been so focused on everything else that I didn't see what was right in front of me. But now, I'm here. And I want to fix this.
The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Sarah said nothing. She looked at him, as if trying to read him, to determine if this was real, if this was the man she had once loved.
After what seemed like an eternity, she finally nodded.
Okay, she said quietly.
Let's try.
It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was a start. A small step toward healing the wounds that had been inflicted over the years.
They didn't have all the answers, and they knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for
the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope.
And that was enough.
Later that evening, Thomas sat in his office, reflecting on the conversation with Sarah. He had always believed that success was defined by his wealth, his career, and his achievements. But now, he understood that true success was measured by the people in his life, by the love he gave and received. He looked at the photo on his desk of him, Sarah, and Lily, taken years ago, when their family was whole. He smiled softly, a mix of sadness and hope filling his heart. Things had changed, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a chance to make things right. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And that was all that mattered.
The following morning brought with it a rare stillness in the Beckett household.
The kind of quiet that comes not from emptiness, but from calm. Thomas woke earlier than usual, sunlight filtering through the tall glass windows, casting a soft glow across the room.
He sat on the edge of his bed for a long moment, thinking about everything that had changed over the past few weeks. For years, he had been a man consumed by work and wealth, chasing success without ever stopping to ask what it was costing him. Now, he realized that the real value in life wasn't in what he owned, but in who he loved. He thought of Sarah, and how their late-night conversation had felt like the first real moment of connection in years. He thought of Lily, her laughter slowly returning, her trust being rebuilt piece by piece. And he thought of Maya, whose quiet strength had been the catalyst for all of this. Without her, none of these changes would have been possible. As he walked downstairs, he found Maya in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as she always did. The morning light caught the edges of her face, making her look serene, almost otherworldly. For a moment, Thomas just watched her, realizing how much gratitude he owed her, not just for what she had done for Lily, but for what she had taught him about compassion, humility, and redemption. "Good morning, Mr. Beckett," Maya greeted him without turning around.
Her tone was polite, but there was warmth there now, a familiarity that hadn't existed before.
"Good morning, Maya," he replied, stepping closer. "I wanted to thank you again. For everything. For helping Lily. For helping me."
Maya smiled gently as she turned to face him.
"You don't have to thank me, Mr. Beckett. You did the hard part. You faced yourself. That's something most people never do."
Thomas shook his head slightly.
"Maybe.
But you were the reason I saw what needed to change. You showed me what I'd been missing." Maya looked down for a moment, then back up at him, her eyes kind but steady. "Sometimes, people just need someone to remind them of who they really are. You were never a bad man, Mr. Beckett. You were just lost. But you found your way back." Her words struck him deeply. He had spent so many years feeling powerful, yet he had never felt as strong as he did now, standing in front of her, humbled by her truth. "You've changed my family's life, Maya," he said quietly. "I want you to know that you'll always have a place here. You're part of this family now." Maya's eyes widened slightly, taken aback. "That's very kind of you, sir," she said, her voice softer now. "But my place has never been in the spotlight. I'm just glad I could help." Before Thomas could respond, the sound of small footsteps echoed from the hallway. Lily appeared in her pajamas, her hair a mess, but her smile bright. "Good morning, Dad," she said, rubbing her eyes. Thomas smiled, his heart swelling. "Good morning, sweetheart." She walked over and hugged him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. He held her close, the simple gesture filling him with more joy than any business success ever had. Maya watched the moment quietly, her expression full of quiet pride. This was what she had wanted, to see this family whole again. Later that day, Thomas went to his office for a meeting, something he hadn't done in weeks. His assistant, Carol, greeted him with a stack of papers and a look of mild surprise. "Good to have you back, sir," she said. "We've all missed you around here." Thomas smiled faintly, but his mind was elsewhere. For the first time, work didn't feel like the center of his world. It felt secondary. He looked around the office, the sleek furniture, the awards, the symbols of success, and realized that none of it mattered the way it once had. The man he used to be would have walked in here with pride. The man he was now walked in with perspective. As the meeting began, Thomas's phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, "Dinner tonight. Just us and Lily. No phones. No business talk. Deal?" He smiled, typing back, "Deal." It was such a small message, but it felt monumental. When he returned home that evening, the smell of home-cooked food filled the air. Sarah was setting the table, and Lily was helping her. For the first time in years, it felt like a real family dinner. Laughter echoed through the dining room, warm and genuine. Thomas looked at them both, his heart full. And across the room, standing quietly near the doorway, was Maya, smiling softly as she watched the family she had helped rebuild. Their eyes met for a moment, and no words were needed. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of what they had all achieved together. Thomas returned the nod, gratitude in his eyes. He finally understood that true power didn't come from wealth or control. It came from kindness, humility, and the courage to change. And as the evening light faded into night, he knew that for the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Months went by, and the changes that had started in the Beckett household were becoming more permanent. Thomas had transformed his life, not through the success of his business, but through his commitment to his family. He had learned the hard way that success meant little if it came at the cost of the people who mattered most. His relationship with Lily continued to grow stronger each day. She smiled more, laughed more, and showed a trust in him that he had longed for. The distance between them had all but disappeared, and in its place, a bond had been formed that would take years to build but would last a lifetime. Maya, too, had become a constant in their lives. What had started as a professional relationship had evolved into a deep friendship and mutual respect. Maya had stayed, not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared for both Thomas and Lily. She had been there when Thomas couldn't see past his own ambitions, and in many ways, she had been the one to guide him back to what truly mattered. One day, Thomas decided it was time to express his gratitude in a way that went beyond words. He had thought about it for weeks, trying to figure out the right way to show Maya how much she had changed their lives. After some contemplation, he came to a decision. It was a sunny afternoon when Thomas called Maya into his office. She entered, her usual calm demeanor in place, but there was a look of curiosity in her eyes. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Beckett?" she asked. Thomas stood up and walked over to the desk where a small envelope sat. He handed it to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Maya," he began, his voice sincere, "this is for you." Maya looked down at the envelope and then back at him, confused but intrigued. She opened it carefully and pulled out a letter. As she read, her face softened. The letter contained not only a thank you note but a formal invitation to become part of the Beckett family's long-term future. It included a proposal for Maya to manage a new project for the family, one that would give her a permanent, more significant role in their lives. Thomas had seen how she had worked with Lily, how she had brought a calmness and wisdom that had helped their family heal. This project would allow Maya to work alongside him and Sarah, ensuring that their family's legacy was built not just on wealth, but on the love and care that they had learned to value. "I know I can never fully repay you for everything you've done, Maya," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know that this is my way of showing you how much we appreciate you. You've changed our lives, and I want to give you the chance to be part of something bigger than any of us." Maya looked up from the letter, her eyes filled with disbelief. "Mr. Beckett, I don't know what to say. I've never expected anything like this."
Thomas smiled, his heart swelling with pride. You don't have to say anything, Maya. You've already done more than enough. This is just a small way for us to say thank you. Maya's voice wavered as she spoke, her gratitude evident. I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever imagined. I've just been trying to help, but this is so much more than I could have ever dreamed of. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. You've earned it, Maya. You've been a part of our family in more ways than you know. Maya's eyes shone with tears, and for a moment, the two of them stood in silence, feeling the weight of the moment. For Thomas, it was more than just an opportunity for Maya, it was a moment of realization that he had finally come full circle. He had learned the most important lessons of his life from the people he had once overlooked. Maya had taught him the value of humility, of care, and of showing up when it mattered most. She had shown him the true meaning of family. As the weeks went on, Maya took on the new project with enthusiasm and dedication, but her role in the Beckett family was no longer just professional. She was, in every sense, a part of their lives. Thomas, Sarah, Lily, and Maya formed a new kind of family, one that was built on love, respect, and the willingness to grow. And as they all sat around the dinner table one evening, laughing and sharing stories, Thomas realized that this was what true success felt like. Not the awards on the wall or the business deals he had closed, but the love and connection that filled the room. They had found their way back to each other, and that, Thomas knew, was worth more than anything he could have ever achieved on his own. Months later, the Beckett family sat together at the dinner table, the warmth of their laughter filling the room. The changes that had begun in their lives felt permanent now. Thomas had rebuilt his relationship with Lily, and Sarah had slowly begun to open up again. What had once been a cold, distant household was now filled with love and understanding. The transformation had not been easy, and there were still moments when the scars of the past seemed fresh. But they were healing together, as a family. Thomas looked around at the people seated around the table, Lily, Sarah, and Maya, who was now more than just a housekeeper. She was a friend, a confidant, and an essential part of their lives. Maya had become a steady force in their home, and through her, Thomas had learned the true meaning of empathy, patience, and what it really meant to be a family. He had spent so many years chasing success, thinking that it would make him happy, but he had never truly understood what happiness was until now. Happiness wasn't in the office building or the bank account, it was in the people who loved you, in the moments shared, and the trust rebuilt. As he sat there, Thomas knew that he had found the balance he had been searching for all along. The pursuit of wealth and power had once consumed him, but now he understood that the most important thing in life was the connections he made and the love he gave. Maya had shown him that. His relationship with Sarah was growing stronger, and their evening conversations were now filled with the kind of intimacy they hadn't shared in years. They talked not just about the practicalities of their lives, but about their hopes, their fears, and their dreams. For the first time in a long time, Thomas felt the weight of his mistakes lift. He had made amends, not through grand gestures or empty promises, but by showing up every day, by being present in the lives of the people who mattered most to him. Lily, who had once been distant and quiet, now sat beside him at the table, her eyes bright with curiosity. The walls between them had fallen, and their bond was growing stronger with each passing day. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As they finished their meal, Thomas felt a surge of gratitude. He had been given another chance to be the father Lily deserved, the husband Sarah needed, and the man Maya had always seen. It wasn't just about repairing the past, it was about building a future together. That night, after dinner, as the family settled in for the evening, Thomas found himself standing by the window, looking out at the quiet night. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The struggles, the doubts, and the regrets were still there, but they no longer defined him. He had learned that true success wasn't just about what you achieved, it was about who you became along the way. And as he looked at the people he loved, Thomas knew that this was the life he had always wanted, even if it had taken him years to find it. Maya's influence had been the spark that had lit the way for him to realize what truly mattered. Without her, he might never have fully understood the depth of his own shortcomings or the power of redemption. But now, with his family whole, with trust rebuilt and love flourishing, he knew that everything he had worked for, the empire, the wealth, the success, paled in comparison to the gift of true connection.
He smiled softly to himself, feeling a sense of fulfillment that went far beyond anything he had ever felt before. The family he had fought so hard to rebuild was finally whole, and that, Thomas knew, was the greatest success of all. Discover a powerful and emotional journey in this captivating black story about redemption, growth, and the transformative power of family. Thomas Beckett, a wealthy and successful man, has spent years consumed by his career, leaving his family and relationships in the shadows. But when he realizes how deeply his neglect has affected his daughter, Lily, he begins the challenging process of rebuilding their connection. In this black story, Maya, an unexpected figure in their household, plays a pivotal role in bridging the gap between father and daughter. As Thomas navigates his own shortcomings, he learns the true value of empathy, patience, and being present for the people who matter most. Through heartache and healing, this black story reveals how one man's journey to self-awareness not only transforms his relationship with his daughter but also with his wife, Sarah. Maya, once seen as just a maid, becomes an integral part of their family, teaching them lessons in love, trust, and forgiveness. With each passing day, Thomas strives to become the father and husband he always should have been, proving that true success is measured not by wealth or status, but by the bonds you build and the people you love. This black story is a testament to the power of change, redemption, and the importance of family. Witness the growth of a man who learns to put his family first, and the impact one woman can have on an entire family's journey. Watch how the story unfolds in this compelling black story, showing the strength it takes to face one's mistakes and make things right.